Part 1. Key 1. Overcoming the sense of being powerless. In this key, we will set a foundation that we can build upon as we continue to explore the connection between mind and matter. And let us begin by considering your situation as you are reading this book. The very fact that you are open to this book, a book that is claimed to be dictated by a spiritual being through the mind of a human being, demonstrates that you did not fall victim to one of the attempts at social engineering that you were exposed to as a child. You may look upon many things that happen as you grow up in Western society, and you may think that they are relatively innocent. And while they may appear innocent on the surface, I can assure you that there are many hidden things that have the specific purpose of limiting people's ability and especially their willingness to think beyond the mental boxes that dominate Western society. Why are you open to this book? Because you have a natural curiosity about things that are beyond the mental box in which you were brought up. And why do you have this curiosity? Because you refuse to submit to the programming that you have been exposed to since childhood. This programming takes many subtle forms. But just take the popular saying that most people have heard as children: curiosity killed the cat. Now, my beloved, it may be so that it was curiosity that killed the cat, but it is also so that it was curiosity that elevated humankind from the caveman stage to the present-day civilization. When you look at the immense progress that has happened between the time of the caveman and today, you will see that the driving force behind all of this progress has indeed been curiosity. The desire to know, the desire to understand, the willingness to ask questions beyond the current level of understanding held by an individual or a society. So you do indeed see, I am sure, that curiosity is the driving force behind progress. Yet I am also sure you can see that while there is a force that drives human progress, there is also an opposing force that seeks to hinder, hold back, or restrict human progress and human curiosity. I have already talked about the two dominant thought systems of Western civilization, namely Christianity and materialism. Can you see that both of these thought systems are seeking to limit your curiosity in order to prevent you from asking questions that go beyond what can be explained by either system? So can you see that there is an ongoing force that seeks to expand human understanding, but there's also a constricting force that seeks to limit human understanding to a particular thought system, to a particular mental box? We will talk more about these forces throughout the book, but for now let me point out two aspects. One is the very personal aspect. There is indeed a force in human psychology that has an insatiable desire for security. This force has been known for a long time to modern psychologists and self-help experts, and it is commonly called the ego. The ego is an element of the human psyche that seeks security above all. One of the ways that people seek to satisfy this quest for security, which is truly a quest for the immortality of the ego, is by adhering to a particular thought system. In order for a thought system to appeal to the need for security, it must claim to have some ultimate authority. This is what you see in traditional religions, such as the monotheistic religions, which claim to be based on infallible authority, namely the Bible being the Word of God. You see the same tendency in materialistic science, which also claims to have an almost infallible authority based on the so-called objective and undeniable findings of science. So when people decide to accept either a religious claim to authority or a scientific claim to authority, their egos can feel that these people are now secure in belonging to an ultimate thought system. This then allows these people to put aside their curiosity, the questions that are not easily answered. You see, an authoritative thought system offers you a sense of security by defining certain questions as being either beyond what can be known or beyond what human beings are allowed to know. And therefore, you can live a comfortable life in the material world without having to be disturbed by these questions that cannot easily be answered from the level of consciousness that you currently have. This then allows many people to set aside or ignore their curiosity. Yet I can assure you that this sense of security is bought with a price. For when you set aside curiosity, you will not only abort personal growth, but you will also abort growth in society. I am sure you are aware of a period in history called the Dark Ages. Do you also realize that these Dark Ages were caused by the fact that the Catholic Church had managed to forcefully suppress all knowledge that went beyond its own doctrines and dogmas? The Catholic Church had effectively created a mental box, and then they had prevented the people of the times from seeking knowledge beyond that box. This is indeed why even the material progress of society was held at a certain level for many centuries. It was only when this mental box began to be shattered by the early scientists and astronomers that you saw a revolution in thought that led to the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, and the Industrial and Scientific revolutions. Thus you see that once the stranglehold of the medieval Catholic Church was broken, then human thought and human invention very quickly caught up to the level it would have been at much earlier if the Catholic Church had not become a suppressive thought system. Unfortunately, you will, if you take an honest look at the state of science today, see that even science can be used to create a repressive thought system. There are those who have taken the findings of science and have used them to create a materialistic system which claims to have proven that there could never be anything beyond the material universe. And thus, this system has simply created another mental box that limits human curiosity. For the system states that while you will not go to hell for eternity for questioning its doctrines, you will certainly be labeled as a person who is unintelligent and superstitious. Now let us take a look at what I said earlier, namely that the original mission of Jesus was to demonstrate the potential for developing the human mind to the state where the mind has actual power over physical matter. Why did Jesus appear on earth? Well, he appeared precisely because there is indeed a group of ascended beings who have volunteered to take on the task of serving to raise the consciousness of humankind. We who are among the ascended host understand very well the dynamics of what is happening on this planet, even though that dynamic is currently unknown to most people. We understand that the driving force of progress is curiosity, and we understand very well that there is another force seeking to restrict progress by restricting people's willingness to ask questions. It was therefore known to the ascended host that, at the time when Jesus appeared, there was a need to bring forth new ideas and a new awareness. We are perfectly aware of certain cycles in the evolution of this planet, and we always seek to bring forth new ideas at the opportune moment, when one cycle nears the end and another cycle begins. If you look at the time of Jesus, you will see that the society in which Jesus appeared was a very restricted and restrictive society. Not only did you have the Roman Empire, which had the physical force to restrict people, but you also had the Jewish religion, which had the force to restrict people's minds. And given that the two cooperated to a large extent, you saw a very heavy suppression, both physical and mental. What you basically saw at the time was that the general population were held captive by a small group, a small elite. This group, this elite, was not homogeneous, but was indeed divided within itself. Nevertheless, the different divisions were able to cooperate to some extent in order to maintain their positions of power and privilege. What was this suppression based on? It was based on a particular worldview. There was the view that the world was very limited in size, and thus there was really no way to escape from the society in which they had been born. Then there was the view that the world was a very unpleasant place to be, but that you had the potential to enter a more pleasurable realm after this life. Yet, entry into the more desirable realm was restricted to people who fulfilled certain conditions, namely, the conditions defined by the prevailing religion of society. What you see here is indeed that there was an elite who had set themselves up in between the people and their God. The people could gain access to God's kingdom, but only by living up to the condition defined by the elite on earth. Jesus came to challenge this view, and he did so in many ways. He did so by demonstrating that his mind had attained power over matter, and if this had been seen as an example that all could follow, it could indeed have revolutionized society. If more people had understood the essential message behind Jesus' mission and had indeed learned how to expand the powers of their minds, well, then the Dark Ages could have been avoided and the Enlightenment could have taken place centuries earlier. How then did the power elite prevent the population from following Jesus' example? Well, they did so by elevating Jesus to an ultimate and superior status as the only Son of God, and therefore the only person who could perform such miracles. They created an elaborate doctrine and thought system which elevated Jesus to the exception instead of the example, and this then set the foundation for creating a mental box that made people accept that the powers of their minds were severely limited. You will see that this mental box survived through the Middle Ages without being seriously questioned. It was only with the emergence of the early scientists that some people began to question the mental box upheld by the Catholic Church. Yet unfortunately, as science became more and more accepted in the Western world, the liberating power of science was severely restricted. Once again, you will see that the emergence of science was clearly an expression of the expanding force that gives people their curiosity, their willingness to ask questions beyond the current mental box. Yet you will also see that there was a power elite that did not want people's curiosity to go too far. And so, as the established power elite of the Catholic Church began to lose its power, you saw the emergence of an aspiring power elite who took control over science, or at least the way scientific findings were interpreted. This aspiring power elite then created what is today the materialistic thought system, which claims that there is nothing beyond the material universe. When you look at how this system was formed, you will see a very clear tendency to suppress knowledge about the powers of the mind. These early materialists attempted to set science up as being in opposition to all religion. They claimed that the obvious flaws of the medieval Catholic doctrines had proven that all religion is a matter of subjective beliefs that have no objective reality to them. Then they came up with the idea that only what was proven through scientific experiments that could be repeated could be considered an objective reality, and thus they managed to make many people believe that the mind was inherently subjective, was inherently unreliable, and therefore should be eliminated from science as much as possible. This then caused a very peculiar condition. The very science that was born from curiosity had now become restricted from exercising curiosity when it came to the human mind. The materialistic paradigm managed to portray the human mind as the product of material processes in the brain. In other words, science, or rather materialism, simply built upon the very paradigm set by the Catholic Church. As I said, the Catholic Church denied the power of the human mind by elevating Jesus to an exception that no one could follow. Thereby, the Church denied the potential that the minds of so-called ordinary human beings could attain power over matter. Materialism simply took this denial to an even higher level by defining the mind as a product of matter. At least religion was open to the potential that a part of the mind could have been created beyond the material universe and could survive the death of the physical body. Thus, there was at least some opening for the idea that the mind could exist independently of the body. Yet with materialism, it was now seen as an infallible doctrine that the mind is a product of the body and cannot exist before the birth or after the death of the body. It was also seen as an infallible doctrine that the mind does not have the power to go beyond the material universe. And certainly it follows from there that the mind does not have power over the matter from which it is created. Do you see the contrast between the true mission of Jesus, which was, of course, an extension of the true mission of the ascended host, and what the power elites on earth have been trying to do for millennia? We of the ascended host are seeking to raise the consciousness of humankind, to raise the self-awareness of human beings, so they will realize who they are and realize the potential they have for taking command over the matter realm by using their minds. In contrast, the power elites that seek to rule this world are seeking to prevent people from rising to the level of self-awareness where they accept their minds have power over matter. Instead, these power elites are seeking to prevent people from coming to this realization so that the people will not use the powers of their minds to escape the control of the power elite. This, my beloved, might be a surprising worldview that you have never heard before, or perhaps you have heard it in various versions. Nevertheless, I tell you that it is essential for you to begin to ponder this dynamic. It is essential for you to begin to ponder the true nature of the mind and the true powers of the mind. For I can assure you that the current problems you see on Mother Earth were created through the powers of the mind. You may have been brought up to believe that natural disasters or environmental problems, such as pollution or global warming, have mechanical, physical causes. Certainly, I'm not denying that there is a mechanical, physical element, but what I'm telling you is that the deeper cause is indeed found in the collective consciousness of humankind. The reality is that most people on earth have been brought up with a greatly distorted view of who or what human beings truly are. The reality is that you are not human beings. You are spiritual beings who were created for a very specific purpose. You were created not to be passive victims of physical conditions on earth. You were created to serve as co-creators who would work along with the creators of the earth in order to raise the earth to a higher level than the level at which it was created. Precisely because you were created to fulfill this role, you were given the powers to fulfill this role. And those powers are the powers of the mind. Whether you realize it or not, whether you believe it or not, human beings are co-creators, and they are constantly co-creating through the powers of their minds. The reality is that human beings are co-creating today, and they have been co-creating for as long as there have been self-aware beings on earth. The many imbalances and problems you see in Mother Nature today were co-created by human beings through the power of the collective mind. The fact that there are so many imbalances demonstrates one very simple dynamic. The imbalances that you see outpictured in nature illustrate the imbalances in the collective consciousness. Human beings have co-created these imbalances, and they are being upheld and even magnified through the continued imbalances found in the collective consciousness. If these imbalances are to be removed from nature, then they must first be removed from the collective consciousness. And this can happen only when a critical mass of individuals remove those imbalances from their individual minds. This is what Jesus came to demonstrate, that one individual can change the world by being willing to raise his or her consciousness. As Jesus said, "If I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me." All human beings are connected through the collective mind. Most people on earth are severely restricted by that collective mind, which hangs over them like a heavy weight that limits their curiosity and imagination. Yet throughout the ages, a large number of individuals have demonstrated that it is possible for anyone to rise above the downward pull of the collective mind. When an individual does so, then that individual will create an upward lift that will raise the collective mind. Certainly there is a limit to the effect that can be created by one individual. And that is why Jesus was not meant to raise the world all by himself into some Edenic state. Jesus was meant to serve as an example so that a critical mass of people could follow that example. And when these people collectively raised their consciousness, they would form such an upward momentum that they would be able to raise the consciousness of the whole. This was the original plan for the mission of Jesus. That plan has not yet come to fruition, but I tell you that there are enough people in embodiment today who have the potential to very quickly awaken to their true mission. And once they awaken to the potential for raising themselves to a higher level of consciousness, well then, they can indeed form the critical mass that will cause Jesus' mission to be fulfilled within a surprisingly short period of time. Part of the purpose for this book is to reach out and awaken these people to see what is the real cause behind the concern for Mother Earth. Your concern is a sign that, deep within your being, you have an inner memory that you have embodied at this specific time for a very particular purpose. And I am now telling you that part of that purpose is indeed to raise your awareness to a higher level, whereby you can become one of the forerunners for raising the collective consciousness to a level that will suddenly expose the essential dynamic I have talked about. This then will enable the population on Earth to come to see through the manipulation of the power elite, and thus to throw off the yoke of serving as the literal or virtual slaves for this elite throughout the centuries and even the millennia. Truly, for Mother Earth to be free from her current burdens, humankind must free itself from the burdens in the collective and individual consciousness. I am aware that many of the people who are concerned about Mother Earth and environmental problems have a tendency to feel powerless. What can one individual do when faced with problems of such enormity as global warming, pollution by international corporations, or even the potential for nuclear war? Yet the central message of this book is that there is indeed something that an individual can do. You are not powerless. You have the power to raise your own consciousness, and thereby you will gain a new vision of the real cause of environmental problems. This will enable you to see solutions that you cannot see at your present level of consciousness. And thus I tell you that the sense that you are now powerless is a complete illusion. If you will heed my words and use them to raise your awareness, then the sense of being powerless will simply disappear. Instead, you will feel a new sense of empowerment, for you will realize the truth behind a statement made by Jesus so many years ago. With men this is impossible, but not with God, for with God all things are possible. The truth behind this statement is that with the level of consciousness that most people have, then many things are indeed impossible. But when you do raise your level of consciousness beyond a certain threshold, then you will be able to activate the natural laws that Jesus activated when he performed his so-called miracles. And when a critical mass of individuals raise their consciousness to this level, well then, you will see a change, even in the physical planet, that from a lower level of consciousness will seem like a miracle. Yet it is not a miracle but the simple result of humankind realizing that the true role of spiritual beings in embodiment is to serve as co-creators and bring the earth to a higher level of balance and abundance. So allow me to take you further into exploring the potential of the mind.